Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Aviva, and I am a researcher of culture and Jewish Israeli art. And I would like to show you a few examples of how Jerusalem is depicted in art across our history. Levi Eshkol, which was the third prime minister of Israel, said a very nice sentence. He said, Jerusalem is in the heart of each one of us. I think Jerusalem takes a part or has a part in the heart of each Jew and Israeli around the world. And if we're talking about activities as teachers, I think you can open up and ask, what is Jerusalem for you? What does Jerusalem mean for you, for each student? And especially also with adults, Jerusalem means so much for people. It's the center of the world, and it's the holy city, and it has so many meanings, historical and spiritual and religious, and even the natural aspects of Jerusalem, and also Jerusalem today as a vibrant tourist city. So what's interesting is that also in art, Jerusalem is depicted in these different aspects and shows the different identities of Jerusalem. And I would like to show you some examples and also the things that you heard this evening. For example, the light of Jerusalem and other definitions of Jerusalem we can also see in the art. So I will show you the time we have some examples. Here, for example, I'm showing you from the 19th century. I'm showing you here a special poster that people used to hang up in their homes. Some people still hang up them in the homes. It's for guarding of the house, shmirah. It's connected to different symbols in the Kabbalah. But what's interesting is that in these different posters, Jerusalem was always in the center. Now, we see here something very interesting. It says here Yerushalem, okay, Jerusalem. But what do we see here? And it all even says Merom Rishon Mekom Mikdashenu, the place of the temple. But what do we see here? We see here Kippat HaSela, right, of the Islamic people. So it's very interesting and odd. But we have to understand that no one really knows how Beit HaMikdash looked like, especially in the past. In the past decades, people began studying Gemara and Talmud, and some people try to depict Beit HaMikdash and the different tools of Beit HaMikdash. But once no one knew how Beit HaMikdash looked like. So the way to depict Jerusalem was by showing Kippat HaZahav. So it's very interesting that this is how Jerusalem was depicted, and it's always in the center. Around Jerusalem, we can see all the different religious and holy places around Israel. For example, Kever Rachel. You see here Kever Rachel, Me'arat HaMechpelah, and it goes on and on. And the beautiful sentence, famous sentence, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. So Jerusalem here is chosen as a religious symbol and as a symbol that protects every Jew around the world. What we see here is different symbols from the Kabbalah, which I won't explain, obviously, but it's interesting to see that Jerusalem is chosen to be the symbol of our belief in God and our belief that Jerusalem, the center of the world, and our holy city can protect us everywhere, any place we are during the whole history of the Jewish nation. Oh, here I'm showing it from close. Another interesting thing is we see here from Pirkei Avot, Az Kanamer, Kal Kanesher, Ratz Katzvi, and we see each time the different animal and also the beautiful decorations. Another thing that's interesting here is the style. This is very Eastern. That means you see here the different little squares that kind of remind us of the ceramics in Israel and in the East. And we see here the flowers again and again and again in a very symmetric way. This style is not doesn't remind us of Western art. It reminds us of Eastern art, because the Jews that lived in Israel and created this art wanted to be part of the culture. And the culture here is the Eastern culture. So it's interesting to see that in the art, we can also see the style of Eastern art. Here's another example from the time. This is just a poster that people used to hang up in their home. You know, the Jews lived here till the 20th century, till the Chalutzim pioneers started making Aliyah, and also took a long, long time. Most of the Jews lived abroad, and the Jews in Israel, most of them lived in the 4 holy cities, and they studied Torah. So they needed donations, what we call kaspei chalukah. So many times they created art, which was a donation that they used to give to the different donors around the world from Europe and from other countries. So here it's a beautiful poster that people used to hang up as a decoration in their house. And again, we see here something interesting. Here again, we see on the right and on the left, we see the Kippat HaZahav and Kippat HaSela. And in the middle here, we can see the Kotel. Now, if you look at the Kotel, it's very interesting. The Kotel looks very flat. And then we have these 3 trees, okay? Now, I don't know if when last time you were in the Kotel, if you ever looked up. If you look up, you'll see them today. Those trees are still there. And we're talking about 120 years ago. And here they are. Okay, here they are. They obviously grew very much. And what's interesting is that here we can't see them in a full way. And here we can. So I don't know if you all know the historical fact that this whole, you see here where I'm showing my mouse, this whole part was added on in the time of Moshe Montefiore. Unfortunately, already then, the Arab population used to throw rocks on the Jews that used to come to the Kotel. So Montefiore initiated to make the Kotel higher. So all this is an addition. But if we would take off this addition, we would see these 3 trees. So they're still there. So it's interesting to see historically how the Kotel looked the same and how the same trees are there. And it's the same Masoret. Now, what about art in Jerusalem? It's very interesting. Already at a very early stage, there were exhibits, art exhibits in Jerusalem. Look what it says here in English. It says, at
לא שומעים.
You hear me?
עכשיו כן.
Okay. So at a very early stage, it was important for the people in Jerusalem to create art in order to express themselves and to turn Jerusalem into a cultural city and to revive Jerusalem after 2,000 years of exile. So what we can see here is an invitation to an exhibition. What it says, the citadel, what it means is the Jerusalem citadel, Migdal David. And it's an archaeological site till today. And they used to do exhibits, art exhibits in the old archaeological rooms. And what's interesting is that today, there's also a museum there today at the David Citadel. There's a museum for the history of Jerusalem, and there's also contemporary art exhibits. So already in the early 1920s, there was art created and exhibited in Jerusalem. And it's interesting, if you can see here, that they're still using religious symbols. We can see here in the back, we can see something that reminds us of haluchot, okay, luchot habrit or Har Sinai. And here, the symbol with the fingers, okay, that's what the Kohanim do, the bracha of the Kohanim. But instead of doing the bracha in the Bet HaMikdash or the Mishkan, what he has between his fingers is a brush, is a brush that they were using for painting. So it's interesting how it's like a revival of the culture and of the spirituality in Jerusalem through art. You can see here between April 15th to May 15th, like we said, the Jewish Artists Association, already in the early 20s. When we move on in history, in the 30s, I'm showing you here a picture of a house. It's called the Ticho House. I highly recommend to visit there next time you're in Israel. It's a beautiful ancient house. There's a lot of Jewish art there, and also the art of an artist called Anna Ticho. Anna Ticho was married to a very well-known eye doctor, and she was a painter, and she made Aliyah and married her Dr. Ticho, which actually was her cousin. In any case, she was part of a group of Jewish artists that came to Israel in the 30s, mainly from Germany and from Austria. You know that many Jews made Aliyah from Germany and Austria after Hitler, Ymach Shmo, became, the head of the Nazi like the governor of the Nazis. And they made aliyah because they were worried about what's going to happen to the Jews. Unfortunately, other Jews did not, but from Germany, many Jews came, and with them, there were a lot of Jews that were painters and sculptors and also graphic artists. So she was one of them, and she's a lovely painter, and she loved the nature of Jerusalem. Another aspect we can see in the art of Jerusalem is the nature of Jerusalem and the area of the Jerusalem hills. And I think the tree that most symbolizes Jerusalem is the olive tree. And she used to draw dozens of olive trees. You can see here an olive tree, a very old olive tree. The olive tree resembles also the history, because I don't know if you know, olive trees can survive over 1,000 years. There's olive trees that are 1,000 years old. And she felt that by depicting the nature, she's connecting herself to the history of Jerusalem. And she used to sit hours and hours in the nature and draw different olive trees. And the feeling is like she has a close and intimate connection with the nature of Jerusalem and with the history of Jerusalem. And another interesting thing is, here I'm showing you a photograph of a real olive tree, of a very ancient olive tree. Look here, here's another olive tree. And she also kind of made them look a little bit human. That means she saw in the different shapes of the olive tree something that reminds her of arms and of faces. And she kind of made the olive trees that she drew look a little bit human and like different characteristics. So it's a real connection to the nature of Jerusalem, to the history of Jerusalem, to the ancient aspect of Jerusalem, and to the people that live in Jerusalem, the ancient people that resemble Jerusalem. Another artist from the time is Yaakov Steinhardt, and here he's showing a little alley in the old city, and it's very interesting. I'm talking about right now about the artists that made Aliyah in the 30s. They actually fled from Germany, from the Nazis, and you can see that their painting, their style is mainly in black and white. Black and white resemble good and evil, and they felt that these are very, very bad times, and they depicted it in their art. So you can see here something quite dramatic. It's a woodcut, which is quite dramatic. It's black and white. On one hand, you can see the light of Jerusalem, which one of the speakers spoke about before, the special light of Jerusalem. On the other hand, there's a lot of darkness in Jerusalem. And what he shows here is how he feels Jerusalem. After he fled and made Aliyah, and his family was left back, and afterwards the Holocaust, obviously, and he's showing here the feeling of being alone, of the Jewish nation finding themselves in terrible times. So it's very dramatic, the black and white here, the contrast of black and white, and the symbols of good and evil. So it's interesting to see that these artists show Jerusalem that they love so much, and they lived in Jerusalem, but they show Jerusalem also from an emotional and psychological point of view that resembles those terrible times of the 30s and the 40s of the Holocaust. I'm showing you here in the handwriting of Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion, I'm moving on to the establishment of the state in Israel. Ben Gurion insisted that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel. I don't know if you know, but there was a lot of pressure from the United Nations saying, no, Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel until today. That's what they claim. And they claim that we should divide Jerusalem between us and between the Arab population. And Ben Gurion, you can see here in his handwriting, it says here 1949, he says the Knesset has to be in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem has to be the capital city. And that's what we know, that's a fact till today. So it's interesting to see that from the beginning of the establishment of the state of Israel, Jerusalem was very, very central, okay, in Israel. And he says here, Yerushalayim hi chelek bilti nifrad memedinat Yisrael uvirata hanitzchit. Jerusalem is an inseparable part of the state of Israel, and she is the eternal center of the state of Israel. And here we can see there was a lot of art around the establishment of the state of Israel and the independence war. And here we can see a very dramatic painting, which is called the Death of the Soldier, and it shows the courage of the soldiers that fought in Jerusalem in the 1948 war, in the Independence War. And we can see them here when one of the soldiers, unfortunately, was killed in the war, and they are mourning. They are mourning this soldier, and they are screaming and yelling and mourning with pain. And what we can see in the background is Chomot shel ha'ir Yerushalayim, okay, are the walls of Jerusalem. You can see here. And it's interesting because if you kind of see the shape, the walls of Jerusalem also remind us of a menorah, of the menorah, which is such a Jewish symbol. And if you look well, you can see here also a triangle. Can you see here one triangle and then another triangle? It's kind of hard to see, but you can see that he's trying also, Marcel Yanko, the artist, is also trying to show here a shape of a Magen David. So he's showing here the courageous soldiers that fought for Jerusalem in the Independence War. And they're in the background of the old city of Jerusalem, the walls of Jerusalem. And he's also showing here two major symbols of the state of Israel and of the Jewish nation and of Jerusalem, the Magen David and the menorah. Jerusalem also is shown very spiritual. You know, there's the Yerushalayim shel Mala, which is the spiritual, ideal Jerusalem, and Yerushalayim shel Mata, which reflects Jerusalem. So here, Reuven Rubin, which is one of the most famous Israeli artists, he's showing Jerusalem, and the feeling is that we are going up. Look at the perspective. The feeling is that whoever here, the camels and the donkeys, are going uphill towards Jerusalem, and the hills of Jerusalem are white, as if they're purified, and as if there's some like in the sky, something very shmeimi, very Eloki, okay, Mamash reminds us of the clouds and of something in the sky, very, very spiritual. Also the feeling, like I said, the perspective feeling of going up towards the ideal Jerusalem, and also the color of white, the purity of Jerusalem, the spirituality of Jerusalem. So it's a beautiful way he describes Jerusalem, and he described Jerusalem many, many times in many paintings. This is an early painting in 1925. Look at this painting before a few years before he died in 1970. Here, Jerusalem is totally spiritual. The feeling is that Jerusalem is like floating inside the clouds. And this really reminds us of Yerushalayim Femala, of the ideal Jerusalem. And another interesting thing is, what's interesting here, we don't have time to ask questions, but look here. Remember we spoke about the kotel and the brosh trees? Here they are. Again, in 1970, we have the kotel, and here he only shows two, but there's still the three trees there. So it's interesting to see that the kotel are always connected with these trees, which these trees actually, we have to remember, they're on Har HaBayit, where some Jews visit today. It can actually be interesting. I don't know if the Jews are allowed to walk. I don't think they're allowed to be so close to the kotel, but it would be interesting to take a photograph of the Jews that visit on Har HaBayit, to take a photograph from that perspective, from their point of view. This is totally abstract in painting. It's Mordechai Ardon, also a well-known painter. Here, it's hard to grasp, but he calls it Jerusalem. And he's talking about the light of Jerusalem, the spiritual light. He's not talking about the natural light from sun. He's talking about the light of Jerusalem, which it feels like the light, the red and orange and green light are coming out of Jerusalem, out of the painting. It's a spiritual light. Yerushalayim oro shel olam. In many, many psukim, Jerusalem is connected to light. And here he's trying to show us not the physical side of Jerusalem, but the spiritual and abstract aspect of Jerusalem through the special light of Jerusalem. Do I have another 5 minutes or?
Yes, you have.
Okay. In any case, I'll So the last aspect I want to show you is art today in Jerusalem. It's not only that painters, like we see, have depicted art during the whole history since, again, after 2,000 years of exile. I'm actually showing you Jerusalem during the past 120 years. What's interesting is also today, Jerusalem is a center of art. Many people, many artists love Jerusalem and live in Jerusalem. There's a lot of galleries and a lot of groups of artists that create in Jerusalem. And there's also a lot of art on the streets, which is wonderful. And it really adds to the feeling that Jerusalem is a vibrant city and an interesting city and a city that attracts people from all around the world. So one of the lovely projects in Jerusalem are the paintings, the 3D paintings on different buildings in Jerusalem. This is at the bottom of Agrippa Street. And you can, if you really walk around the center of Jerusalem, you can see, I'll show you a few examples. It's a whole building that the whole side of this building was painted by a special group of painters, actually not Jewish. They came from France, and they wanted to make Jerusalem a more vibrant city. So they actually painted different scenes of daily Jerusalem, daily life in Jerusalem on these buildings. So what you can see here is just like a building in Jerusalem, but it's interesting. You can see the arch, which reminds us of ancient Jerusalem, and you can see a desert in the background. And you can see here all the people that are osim aliyah, olim laregel in Jerusalem. And here there's also just daily situations. So I'll show you from close. For example, here it's very cute. Here's someone on a mirpeset, on a balcony in Jerusalem, and he's watering the plants. And the water is dripping down to the neighbor. You can see here, one second. He's dripping water on the neighbor here, which is getting a little bit mad at him. So it's like something kind of humoristic in the daily life of Jerusalem. And it's really beautiful because when you walk at the bottom of the shuk on Agrippas and you see it, it looks real. It's like 3D, even though it's a totally flat painting. And it's called in French, trompe-l'oeil, which means it's like an illusion. It's like an illusion of the reality. Another one is in Mamash in the center of Jerusalem, if you recognize here in the Jaffa Street, where the new train, I hope you already had the opportunity of riding on the city train in Jerusalem. So you can see here also on the wall of this building, you can really see the train coming around. And again, you can see the balconies. So it just turned Jerusalem into way more interesting and vibrant. And the last example I want to give you is in the shuk of Machne Yehuda, which became so attractive to tourists and also all around Israel. People come not only to buy fruits and vegetables, but they come for a culinary experience and to buy the baklawa and the falafel and all the special foods. And actually two young guys, British and American, but which are graffiti artists, Solomon Souza and the founder of the project, Beryl Hahn, they decided that they really can turn the Machne Yehuda shuk into an art experience. And they call different graffiti artists and tell them, come and join us. And when night comes and all the stores, have this like kind of like tris to close their shops, then they had these graffiti artists do graffiti on the different shutters. And when night falls, and when people come, like also in the evening for, to drink something or to eat something, it's like visiting in an art museum, but it's outside. And each shutter has a different figure on it. For example, here we can see, it's a figure that reminds us of the Messiah and the white donkey. And here we can see Moshe Montefiore, which we spoke about at the beginning of the lecture at the Kotel. So here's Moshe Montefiore, and we can see in the background, the windmill. So it's really beautiful to see the shuk at night. I highly recommend. And the last graffiti, also that's in the area of the shuk, really shows Jerusalem. I think it kind of puts everything together. It says here Yerushalayim and Jerusalem. Yerushalayim here has the letters are going up towards the sky and are in light blue, just like the sky. That's the ideal Jerusalem, Yerushalayim shel Mala, which makes us better people and better Jews and connects us to God. And here is this, you can see again the Magen David, which is actually the letters of Aleph and Mem. That means Im Eshkachech Yerushalayim. Okay, so he used the Im, the Aleph and the Mem that together look like the Magen David. Then he wrote Eshkachech Yerushalayim. Here he's showing again Yerushalayim Shel Mala. And at the bottom, he's writing Jerusalem in English, and it's made out of stones. The whole idea of the Churban Shel Yerushalayim is that we are rebuilding Jerusalem. And the special zchut, just like the Yishai said before, the special zchut of us to live in Jerusalem and to rebuild Jerusalem, to live in Jerusalem and rebuild Jerusalem and to create art in Jerusalem and to turn Jerusalem into a wonderful, vibrant city is that it's a big zchut we have. So this graffiti puts all these ideas, I think, together, and it's a real neat graffiti. So I just want to finish with part of a song of Yehuda Amichai, the poet Yehuda Amichai, which I think connects us to today. And this is what he writes. Once I sat on the steps by a gate at David's Tower. I placed my 2 heavy baskets at my side. A group of tourists was standing around their guide, and I became their target marker. You see that man with the baskets? Just right of his head, there's an arch from the Roman period, just right of his head. But he's moving, I said to myself. So I said to myself, redemption will come only if their guide tells them, you see that arch from the Roman period? It's not important, but next to it, left and down a bit, there sits a man who's bought fruit and vegetables for his family. The big zchut to live in Jerusalem and to visit Jerusalem and turn Jerusalem into a center part of our heart and of the reality of the Jewish nation. So thank you very much, and I hope you can pass on these ideas to your students, and you were invited also to contact me for more ideas. So thank you very much to Adi and to Noah, and Erev Tov, להתראות מפסגות.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aviva, for showing us the importance of art there is in Jerusalem, how much impact it had on artists from like 1,000 years until now, and to show us where we can find the art on our next trip to Jerusalem. So thank you so much for that. And I wanted to share too that our main goal at Olam Shalem is really to connect students